He's a scientist with the National Institute of Hydrology, Roorkee, which is a premier research and development organization under the Ministry of Jal Shakti of the Government of India. Dr. Aditi Kapoor, who is the co-founder of Alternative Futures. It is a development research and communications group working on creative and meaningful policy, social and technological alternatives and innovations for development and social change. We have with us Dr. B.K. Tiwari, former head of Department of Environmental Studies, Northeastern Hill University, Shillong, which is a central university. And Mr. Tithal Parmar, he's a WASH specialist with the UNICEF. I welcome all the esteemed panelists on the dais and will be happy to initiate this conversation. So welcome you all. There will be a mix of presentations and then moderated panel discussions with the speakers we have on the dais. We have already overshot by 15 to 20 minutes. So we'll try and have a Q&A session at the end if time permits. So be alert, note down your questions in case you have any. And I would also request the panelists with due apologies, given we are running late, so we'll have to restrict to the time. Let me start with Dr. Arvind. If you can, we can have your presentation. So he'll be presenting on climate water disaster nexus, moving from geopolitics to geoeconomics. This will be his title.
Presentation, please. So I start with, good afternoon everyone at the outset. I thank the organizer for giving me an opportunity to speak in this session. The title of my presentation already discussed. So next. The objective of presentation is to understand the challenges and impact of climate change, walking through the drivers of the disaster and the understanding how water is a tool for cooperation. Tangible effects of climate change are already being experienced around the world, and so in the eastern Himalayan states. We are changing as a result of a globally rising average temperature, increased frequent and intensifying extreme weather events like heat waves and the noxious air pollution across South Asia. These changes and events are interlinked by various ecological and social and economic relationships and interconnected systems and are often referred to a global planetary crisis.
Can you please support in moving the presentation slides?
Next slide.
The PowerPoint slider is not working. Can someone from the operations team please help with this? If you can move the slides from there.
Next slide, please. Okay. Sadly, all the ecosystem, whether aquatic and terrestrial, are degraded due to the anthropogenic activities. This is the next one. Before that. Okay. Tangible efforts of climate change are already being experienced around the world, and so are the external. This is the next one. Next. Yeah, this one. Thank you. Sadly, all the ecosystems, whether aquatic and terrestrial, are degraded due to the anthropogenic and geogenic activities. These are the various stressors like pollution, deforestation, overfishing, extensive and unsustainable farming, dumping of waste in the landfills, etc. At the core of every issue is changing climate. Ecosystems provide us with a multitude of benefits like ecosystem services which make human life possible, as Meghalaya government actually say about this. Life possible by providing nutritious food and clean water, regulating disease and climate, supporting the pollination and of the crop and soil formation, and providing recreational, cultural, and spiritual benefits. Next slide. Next. Yeah. To limit us at 1.5 target, not some random statistics, but rather an indicator of the point at which climate impact which become increasingly harmful for us and our planet. We need large scale transformation to achieve this goal, such as major shift in technology, cost, attracting more climate finance and investing from developing country as I promised, exploring synergies among various SDGs, because it is like a chain reaction. You cannot achieve one SDG by neglecting other, adopting a transversality approach, development which refer to an interdisciplinary and a cross-sectoral approach, taking into account a variety of dimensions and connections which align all our actions toward carbon neutrality. Next one. Yeah, this one. Yeah. The challenges of climate change, however, are systematic and wide-ranging. These are the compounding effects of the multitude and interacting drivers, such as mentioned in the slide. Rising number of extreme weather events like flood, drought, storms have costly impact on cities' basic services, infrastructure, housing, human livelihoods and health, food, agriculture, extreme weather events, unpredictable water availability despite having major rivers in this region. Next one. Yeah. We should adopt ourselves to meet all the possible development as a matter of principle. Therefore, ambition is needed, such as integrating ecosystem-based adaptation approach in state and national policies. I think Meghalaya already started. Knowledge-based adaptation and governance, action that promote both goals and provide win-win situation. Already it looked. East policy transportation corridor was initiated here. We need more cooperation in water resources. Yeah, next one. Cooperation should be on different policy instruments for the management of natural resources, including water, biodiversity, fisheries, forest, eventually leading to the ecological benefits like addressing biodiversity loss, water availability, and pollution control, etc. The economic benefits are in terms of availability of water for irrigation during lean period, leading to the high crop yield. Early warning systems could lead to a less disaster, which equal to low cost in damage control. Cooperation treaty leads to a less conflict over shared waters, improved in relations between riparian countries, and integration in other fields beyond, like increased regional trade, transboundary transportation and development, etc. Next. This cooperation can be augmented by using the multi-track water diplomacy framework. Framework just means because these situations not actually limit to a one state, one country, because it's a regional problem. So that's why water diplomacy framework, which help to diagnose water problem across sectors, administrative boundaries across sectors, administrative, and a different level of governance. Mapping multi-stakeholder interest and ensuring inclusive participation and engagement, negotiating benefit sharing agreements, sharing of knowledge and data, applying international water laws or agreement with consensus, and finally strengthening institutional arrangement for the implementation of agreements and the treaties. Applying horizontal approach like water, energy, food nexus, and vertical approach like ecosystem-based adaptation, which has already been integrated by several countries in these national policies. Next. The flexible legal framework, such as the agreement enhancing institutional capacity, can support the development and implementation of adaptation strategies and measures. Nothing can be achieved without finance and investments. Multifarious economic opportunities shall lead to economic upliftment. Adopting transversality approach by integrating optimized financing, improved data and information, enhanced capacity innovations and governance by establishing a water and climate regional hub for cooperation, stability, and shared prosperity. It shall address climate and disaster migration and also lead to timely SDG achievement. Next. So these are some of our best climate biodiversity action, first fourth in the world in 2021, and as among best from the Meghalaya itself. This congratulations Meghalaya, which was are published on various UN platform and paved a path of Meghalaya to achieve net zero target. Next. These are some of my latest publications. My latest book on ecosystem-based adaptation delve on these approaches and affirm that water is the most effective tool to tackle vagaries of climate change because climate change is the water change. Thanks for your time and patience. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you so much, Dr. Arvind, and thanks again to you for bringing in the and introducing, the risks which emerge from transboundary sharing of waters and the transboundary nature of these risks, which some of these Himalayan states, as well as states like Bihar and others are facing. And some very important recommendations and suggestions given by you, so I highly appreciate that. We'll come back to some of those if time permits. But as of now, I would like to invite Dr. Vishal, taking forward from where he left, talking about the risks and then what kind of committees can be constituted, etc. And your expertise in cryosphere and hydrosphere. So could you set the context on the impact of climate change on these systems, the region in particular, and also maybe talk and enlighten us about your research on glacial lake outbursts. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So thank you everyone. So recently at NIH, I am working in the Indian Himalayan region. In one project, we are covering around the whole entire Himalayan region, including the western part of the Himalayan region and the eastern part of the Himalayan region. So initially we have taken 3 river basins. One is Satluj River Basin, another one is Upper Ganga River Basin, and third one is Teesta River Basin. So in that particular project, we are trying to assess the glacial retreats and their consequences on the resultant runoff in respect to like snowmelt runoff as well as the glacier melt runoff and the other runoff components. So if we talk about the climate change issues like here we are talking about, so as you already know that, and if you have read or gone through the recently published the IPCC assessment report 6, so if you read about the India specific observations, so you will find that the global annual average temperature has been increased, and the climate warming is also affecting our Indian Himalayan regions. So as per our studies that we have conducted at NIH, we have seen that in higher Himalayan areas, especially, around 1.5 degrees centigrade temperature increase is reported. And because of that, you are seeing that most of the glaciers are receding, except few glaciers, that is the part of Karakoram. We will discuss those glaciers also. But as per the studies that we are conducting at NIH, like Satluj River Basin, which is part of Indus River Basin, then Ganga River Basin, and Teesta River Basin. Teesta is a part of Sikkim Himalayan western part, eastern Himalaya. So at Baspa River Basin, in last 30 years, we can say around 19% glacier retreat is observed. Unlikely to Ganga, around 5 to 6% glacier retreat is observed, and in Teesta, a similar 5 to 6% glacier retreat is observed. And because of that, you will find that the flow regimes, especially in the downstream portions, is significantly affecting in terms of magnitude and in terms of the seasonality. So these are the consequences that we are reporting in the Indian Himalayan regions. And one more important thing I would like to add here, like in the Baspa River Basin, if you see that, so the magnitude of change of the glaciers retreating is higher than the other 2 regions. The region could be like the glaciers which are situated at very high elevation areas. those are found less prone to heat, as the glaciers which are situated around the moderate elevation ranges. So significantly, we are getting the runoff changes, and in the downstream sections, the water availability problems are there. And recently, you have heard about the one disaster happened in the Sikkim state. The South Lonak Lake recently burst in October 4, and because of that, lot of problems we faced, especially the Tista Dam 3 is washed away, and some hydroelectric projects is also affected, and lot of lives. So we have reconstructed the similar glacial lake outburst flood in the South Lonak Lake, and we tried to develop a early warning system for that. And if you see in Upper Ganga River Basin, one very important lake is there that is very highly vulnerable now. And I can say in last 20 years, we observed that the lake is doubled in size, and lot of volume is increased in that particular lake. The lake name is Masartal Lake, that is situated at the snout region of the Khatling Glacier, which is a part of the Bhilangna River Basin. So these are the things are happening because of the climate change in the Indian Himalayan River. So what we have thought to mitigate these consequences, first we are focusing on the developing a early flood warning system, or flash flood or GLOW early warning system. So we have taken the example of the South Lonak Lake, and we reconstructed the GLOW event, and we understood what were the factors that were responsible for the glacial burst. So if you see in the first factor, if you see, so a lot of crevasses were there in the snout region of the glaciers, and because of the heavy rainfall that has happened in 2-3 days ago of that particular event, so a big iceberg was detached from the glaciers, and that put into the lake, and that suddenly increased the volume of the lake, and in the outlet of the lake that is breached, and the sudden flood happened in that particular region. So then we analyzed the long-term effect why the glacial lakes are increasing the volume and why the area is increasing. So we have seen that the glacier retreating was the main factor. Around 20 years data we have tried to simulate through different hydrological models like SPHY and Hake HMS models we have used. Then we have analyzed why this volume is increased. So we have seen that if you take 4 main components, runoff component, especially in the glacier-fed river basin, one is snow melt runoff, another one is glacier melt runoff, third one is base flow, and fourth one is the rainfall-induced flow. So the glacier retreating is high. We found that the glacier retreat was the main factor that is contributing to the high amount of runoff in terms of glacial runoff, and that is feeding to the lake. And because of that, the volume is suddenly increased. And especially in last 4-5 years, the lake size was hugely increased. And because of that, that event happened. So similarly, we are trying to establish an early flood warning system in the Masar Tal Lake region, and for that we have tried to install a lot of instruments like automatic weather system, automatic water level recorder, and other hydrometeorological observation instruments we have installed there. Then we will monitor all the real-time parameters, and then we will use those inputs in the first hydrologic model, and we will generate the boundary conditions that is required to run the hydrodynamic approach, because a lot of parameters are involved in the early flood warning system. So we have developed an integrated approach, which is also the part of hydrologic as well as the hydrodynamic modeling system. So we are generating the data also, and then we will input those data in the hydrologic model. Then we will calibrate and validate the model. Once our model is established, our model is calibrated and validated, then we will use the real-time flood information. Like in IMD and in some another space agencies like JAXA, they are providing us the prior rainfall data information. So if you have that kind of rainfall data information, directly you can put in the map, in the model, and then you can generate the forecasted flow or forecasted flood flow. So suppose that in future, if there is any extreme event is going to happen, so we can inform the people early as much as possible. So these things are going on at NIH, so that we are working on. Apart from that, if you have any further questions, so I can answer.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vishal. Maybe we can take the questions once we have
Yeah,
listened
I
to
would
all
be
the
happy.
speakers.
Some questions can come from the participants.
Yeah, okay, we have a question. Okay. Can we have a mic there?
Actually, I made the presentation, but yeah, so.
Check.
Just one question this time, because we'll be parking all of them for the end when we listen to everyone.
Hello, sir. I'm Dr. Subhash Dhakal from Sikkim. So I have a question
Yeah, sure.
related to the flood forecasting of destabilization. I suppose that the forecasting system was, I think, installed in the area. The bridge was somewhere near to Indo-China border, and it took 4 hours. The flood took 4 hours to reach and devastate the entire valley. So, given the climatic condition on that terrain, so how effective would be the flood forecasting system? Would it operate at that climatic condition where there are very high velocity winds during the afternoon time? So it's over the Tibetan plateau, so the climate is very different. So how effective would be the flood forecasting system? So would it work, or it was, I suppose
Basically,
it was
the
installed.
question is that
Actually, I would like to add here, I think before 15 days ago of that event, one team was visited from the government of India and Swiss agencies. Those were involved to monitor that particular lake. They identified, I think, 4 or 5 vulnerable lakes in the Sikkim region. And we were working on there. And I was also part of that particular team. So what we have seen that I think many factors are there that triggered simultaneously, and that was the reason for that particular burst of that particular lake. And the early flood warning system will give you only the approximation. Okay, so suppose that ultimately you are going to model the real-time phenomena, and you are going to model the extreme events, conditions. So if you have a very good data, so that's what I am mentioning here. First, we have to install the number of instruments which are required or which can give you the real-time information of the required parameters. That is necessary to understand the flash flood conditions. Okay, so we are going to install number of hydro observation instruments there in the Masartal. I am giving the example. Similarly, can be done for any other region also. And we have to go for the integrated approach. One model cannot be sufficient for that. So integrated approach means hydrologic analysis will also be there, then hydrodynamic analysis will also be there. So number of parameters are there. You have to put all the parameters as accurately as possible. Then you can expect the uncertainty constant. Okay, uncertainty is a very big thing in modeling system. So that we have to minimize, and that can be minimized only if you have a good hydro observation data set to monitor the real-time event. And like we are dependent on the IMD based weather forecasting system, they are using the WRF models to predict the rainfall, prior rainfall. Similarly, the JAXA agencies are there. So some uncertainties are there. But those uncertainties can be minimized if you are measuring the real-time parameter based on the local weather conditions and local topographical conditions. So those uncertainties can be overcome, and you can increase the reliability of your flood warning system. Like we have reconstructed the South Lonak Lake event, and we have seen that at the time of lake burst, around 1 hour 49 minutes it took to reach the flash flood to the Chungtang Dam. So still, if you have a good early warning system, still you have at least 2 hours. And before that, if you have the good forecasted rainfall information, you can put into the model, and at least 60%, 70%, 80% based on the probability, you can do the assessment. So at some conclusion we can reach, but we cannot sure that, I mean, how much the model will be reliable. But at least if we are able to target the 50% or 60%, then it is good. So that we can do, and we can do that.
Thank you, Dr. Vishal. I think so. The key takeaway based on this discussion was integrated data management, not just flood related, but also climate related data. And based on this integrated data management, the modeling also needs to be robust enough to provide those early warnings. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So, moving on to Dr. Tiwari. So, we have just now listened to the story of flash floods. And forests, as we know, they play a very important role in not just controlling the runoff, the sudden runoff which happens, but also in providing these water resources. As we say, forests से हमारे ज़्यादातर rivers originate होते हैं. You want to show your slides? Okay. So we would like to understand, based on your research and experience, how the degradation of forest ecosystems is happening, and how is it impacting the water resources, and maybe what remedial measures the government can take. Pranav, can we have the slides? Maybe you can start, sir, till the point of time they load it.
Good afternoon, everybody. I will be talking on the climate change and water relations. You can say climate-water nexus in Meghalaya. So my main theme will be Meghalaya-centric and climate and water. Later on, I want to finish it in 5 minutes if the slides come. And then after that, the remaining question answer can be done later on. So what in Meghalaya, we have done studies on the climate change, and we have found that both, I think the data should have come.
Can you please check? Okay.
So both climate, that means the temperature as well as the water rainfall is increasing. But interestingly, over a period of time, the frequency of heavy rainfalls is not so. Next slide, please. So go back, let me acknowledge the collaboration. This work has been done by NEHU and also IIT Gandhinagar. So some of the analysis and computational work has been done at IIT Gandhinagar with Dr. Bimal Mishra, and other field work, etc. has been done by us. So go ahead. The next. Yeah, this slide shows that how the temperature conditions in our state is increasing. It's at the rate of about the 0.031 degrees centigrade per year. And if you see the rainfall, it is about 11.56 mm per year. the the naturally the rainfall and temperature conditions, they vary from year to year, but the red line shows that there is a direct increase, definite increase in the temperature as well as rainfall. Next please. Yeah. Here what we have done a precipitation projection for a period of 2016 to 2090. What emerges out of it is that the southern slopes of East Khasi Hills and West Khasi Hills, which receive very high precipitation, are projected to face relatively lesser rise in precipitation. So there, the places in Meghalaya where already rainfall is high, the net increase is less. The whole analysis has been done on the four scenario. The first scenario is that where we are going to stop greenhouse gas emission by 2020, and the last one is the most liberal. And we find that in all the scenarios, the precipitation is increasing. Next. What you see precipitation projection of extreme wet days. Here the scenario is different. Extreme wet days are not increasing. That is the another finding which is interesting, because if the extreme wet days are also increasing, that means the chances of disasters are more. But in this case, rainfall related disasters are probably they will be less. Next. Next we come to the heat wave projections. Those people who have come from Meghalaya, they know that every other year we get storms. And then these storms are more in the upper elevations, that means higher elevations. And we can see that number of heat waves are also projected to increase in frequency over a period of time. The study is from 2016 to 2090. All along, in all scenario, this is what is projected. Next. So this is the last slide, which we can see that the average temperature, average rainfall, and heat waves are on rise. And this has been done on multi-model by using multi-model conditions, and the region is projected to receive lesser number of extreme precipitation events. This is the data based on the analysis. The increase in rainfall is lesser in places receiving high rainfall. The last one, the increase in average temperature and average rainfall and heat waves may increase frequency of disasters. So this is the major finding. Now we need to see that take on the adaptation measures as far as possible, and if possible to go for mitigations measures. That's all. That's what I want to make presentation. And any question comes?
Yeah, I mean, thank you so much, Dr. Saab, for presenting these slides. The analysis and the findings, they are really an eye-opener. If you can also throw some light on the adaptation options which you talked about, specifically from the forest sector, because Meghalaya, as we see, is very green, and with some of these things we are just talking and discussing about disasters and all, so they can create an issue for these ecosystems. So how the state should approach the forest conservation for water reliability?
In my opinion, having studied forests, community forests and forests in general over a period of 20-25 years, in one line, if I have to say, I will say that the climate change adaptation in Meghalaya should start from improvement of forest health. So if we can improve our forest, both stop the degradation and also go for regeneration, then many of the climate related adaptation can be held. can be achieved, because that it is the forests which are the source of water in our state. Most of the water springs, they originate from the forest, and all water related issues, they are, the water is most critical component of climate change adaptation. If you can adopt for the water management, half of the climate change adaptation is done. So therefore we, and in that case, we have, you can see that the communities where the forests are more, they are less vulnerable, and the climate change impact will be less. So therefore, the first adaptation measure should be that, and then, I mean, there are so many others. Like one thing which is happening in our state is we are going for monoculture plantation of broom grass, large scale, monoculture of erica nut, and so many other monoculture crops that has to be controlled, or they have to be mixed cropping. So if we, that is also, that will also help in the conservation of water, and thereby also help us in adaptation to the climate change. Anything else? I think there are so many, but.
No, thank you, sir, for that. We will take questions from the audience once we hear from all the speakers. So, requesting all of you to please note your questions and park them till the end of the discussion. Thank you, sir. Moving on to our next speaker, Dr. Aditi. You have immense experience of working at the grassroots, again on sectors like environment, climate change, agriculture, livelihoods, etc. And based on this immense ground level experience, if you can share some of the adaptation best practices with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Saranch, and thank you to the organizers for having me here. Very, very important topic. And Tiwari Saab, aapne to mere muh ki baat chhin li. I could not agree more with him, and that's something that's really what I have been trying to say, that we cannot think of water without vegetation. You can't divorce water from vegetation, so you have to think of it together. If you can just go to my next slide. So if you just look at this graphic, you see that all the problems that are happening, fallen trees, sediment discharge again, greenery, I know, I'm just pointing it out, debris, landslide, slope failure. Just do the next click, please. So if all this has to be arrested, you have to follow an ecosystem approach for any development. Hold on. Don't be so fast. So you have to follow an ecosystem approach for development, and not a developmental approach to preserve the ecosystem. So I think that is what I would really like to put forth for this particular meeting, that you have to look at the ecosystem in its entirety. And how do we do that? We talked about the declaration that is to come tomorrow, and how do we implement it? So how do we do that? Go to the next slide, please. So what is this framework that we can follow on the ground from what my experience shows, Just click. So we have to make sure that we are actually, please click, that you have to mitigate the immediate disasters, right? So if you're looking at the ecosystem approach to development, then you're looking at the water and the greenery and whatever other interventions you are making, all of it together. Next click, please. You also have to factor in the long-term climate changes, so that's extremely important. For instance, the spring rejuvenation program that we have, the one, it began in Sikkim, and now they are not too sure. That's also leading to landslides, because everywhere where they made structural changes, the plantation is not there to arrest the water. So there are landslides. What's going to happen when the temperature rises, when there's less of vegetation, and there is rainfall, what is going to happen? So I think it's extremely important to look at that. Similarly, the Cherrapunji Desert, for instance, that we talk about, long back, there were oak trees, right? But now when scientists are doing studies, they're saying that in those forests for reforestation, there are no pockets of water and the nutrition is very less. So I completely agree that if we start doing monoculture of only one, we are just compounding the problems. 10 years down the line, we will have multiple problems. So I think it's extremely important to look at the climate factors and take a 30, 50-year point of view, 60-year point of view, and not just the 5 or 10 years. For climate, it's the temporal which is difference. We have to look at it from a long-term view now. And the last click, please. And for doing that, we have to rejuvenate the entire ecosystem. So I keep saying that we talk about the river basin. I've noticed that whenever we talk about the river basin approach, you know, we talk about the command area, we talk about the catchment area, we don't talk about the ecosystem in which it is playing. We have to look at the ecosystem. And what does the ecosystem see? You saw from that graphic, it's not just the precipitation, and it's not just the water and the vegetation, it's also the built-up structure. What are the built-up structure doing on it? So I think in the morning, the ADB colleague mentioned, Mr. Gore, that we have to look at the blue, the green, and also the gray. Let's go to the next slide. So we don't have to look at only the water resources, we have to look at the entire resources, and the grey infrastructure are also resources for us, right? We need to have our primary health centers, we need to have our schools, we need to have all this, roads, dams, everything, right? So in the long run, we have to have a long-term point of view. That's been what I would like to say. Next slide, and that's really, I'm going to stop there. Click, please. So how are we going to do it? So I think it's important to have a, next click. You have to have a three-dimensional approach. Kuch bhi karenge, whether it is a water basin, whether it is an afforestation, can we put in this three prism? What is it doing to my blue resources? What is it doing to my green resources? What is it doing to my gray resources? Whatever, wherever my action is, what is it doing to these three key resources that I have within the larger ecosystem? Next click, please. And this is going to lead to, next click, an integrated action which will, next click, it's going to mitigate our disaster now, it's going to factor in the longer term changes that are going to take place in that ecosystem, and it's going to protect our ecosystem. So in this slide, I've taken the spring rejuvenation as one example. If you can just quickly click. So your spring rejuvenation will solve your immediate water crisis. Next. But if you factor in what's going to happen to your temperature rise and your precipitation, then what's going to happen to your spring rejuvenation? We have to factor that in the next 30 years, kya badlav aane wala hai? Will my spring continue to fall as luxuriously, or is that going to be difficult? And then do I have to plant more trees? Next click, please. And so we have to protect our entire blue, green, gray resources to be able to actually have development gains that are not eroded. So I think that's extremely important to know, that we cannot, you know, I like the word that was used by the additional secretary in the morning, hydroschizophrenia. So I think we do that with every silo that we create. So the forest department will not talk about the water resources will go to the forest department only when they need to. But I think at the policy level, we need an integrated ecosystem policy framework at the state level, where your green and your blue and your gray policies will be assessed and then implemented. Then hopefully we will be able to save our ecosystem, because you're right, कि अगर forest है तो adaptation है, and all communities that save forest are better adapted to even to climate change and to disasters than forests where forests are not preserved and where they are not protected. Thanks. I mean, I can give you one or two examples from where I've been. For instance, you know, so in Himachal Pradesh, I have a colleague sitting here from Himachal Pradesh, so we were doing some training and we had some elected panchayat women leaders there, and they were seeing what we can do, and they decided to use Manrega and the water harvesting scheme to put a water harvesting structure in the forest. And we said, why do you want to construct it in the forest? They said, because our forest is denuded. We get fires, forest fires. There's no way that a fire brigade can come over there, through the roads. So the water harvesting structure will help us, A, put out the fire, B, it will give us water, 3, it will moisten our soil so we can do the vegetation over there, and 4, it will help on our livelihoods. So I think those kind of integrated solutions, which often come from people, need to be there, and I wish I could see more women here, because the frontliners of water use are really the women. But I'll come to that later. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Aditi. That was really an eye-opener. Uh, Adopting an integrated approach, and this is where systems thinking and systems mapping becomes very important. How one aspect links to the other and reverse. So if we look at some of these aspects from a systems level, I think we would be able to address them. And yes, I also like that second last point in Dr. Shakil's presentation on hydroschizophrenia. Maybe I can have a question on this towards the end of how to crack it. But anyways, moving on to our next speaker, Mr. Parmar. He is a WASH specialist, water, sanitation and hygiene. And when we talk of climate change, the extreme events, climate-induced disasters, so this aspect of WASH becomes very important. And he has been working in the state of Assam. So, Mr. Parmar, if you can throw some light on what approaches you have taken and what can be some of the key learnings, not just for Meghalaya, but for other states in this region as well.
Thank you, Sharans, and good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. After lunch, I think it's difficult to have a session, so now it's time to speak and share my experience. I would like to thank first Government of Meghalaya, and special thanks to Sakil sir for this opportunity and to part of this water conclave to share my experience and learning that from last 17, 18 years I'm working in the war sector, the different organizations, from last 6 years with the UNICEF. If we talk about any disaster, in any disaster or extreme weather situations, what we observe is that the most sufferers are the children and women and the elderly people. And if you look at that, the war sector is the worst sector affected in any kind of disaster or extreme weather events. So my talking points and experience linked to the thematic sessions with the focus on the risk-informed planning and programming. It's one of the priority area of the Sendai framework for the disaster risk reductions and SDG 2030. If we take an example of the war sector or any state, it is important to understand the disaster and climate risk from all dimensions, which includes the vulnerability, hazards, and the capacity. So if you talk about the vulnerability, I think it's important to understand the aspects of the health situations, the aspects of the nutritional status. It's important to understand the capacities of the different stakeholders with respect to the financial, human resource capacities. If we are talking about the hazards, importantly, if we take an example of Meghalaya, the landslides, floods, right? And recently, I think few days back, we also had some shocks of earthquake shocks, right? So I think it's important that we have to understand all dimensions of the risk. WAS is a cross-cutting sector, and it's very much contributing to all the sectors. The health, nutrition WAS, mainly on the child survival and the development. Water is everyone's subjects, and therefore it is equally important for all the development sectors to analyze. If I'm saying all the sector means all the departments, like from the morning we are talking about how we converge with the different departments, link with the departments. That's our priority, how we can utilize our resources available effectively, and we can put it in the plan and to strategize effectively. If I'm talking about all the sector, it means starting from all the levels. It's at the state level, district level, block level, gram panchayat, village level, ward level, and also the urban local body level. So I think it's not only about the planning at the higher level, but also how we can take it further down to the ground level. And very importantly, after analyzing the risk, it's important to quantify the risk by understanding the hazard, vulnerability, and the capacity. I'm linking very much with the water aspects. I think all colleagues has already discussed the respective the points, but my point is very much linked with how we can go by the systematic approach, try to understand the risks, keeping in mind the hazard, vulnerability, and capacity, and coming with the realistic solutions, keeping in mind the resources available with the state government, and also the SOPs, the guidelines, the strategies. I think in morning we are talking about the water policy and the SOPs. State also have the state disaster management plan. They also have a school disaster management plan. How we link with the different departments and to ensure the resources and plans available. Instead of creating a new line of actions, I think it's important now that we can integrate into the existing plan of actions. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. I think every time what I heard when we go and talk, I think we think about some innovations and we bring the cost-effective plannings. Let's talk about the technology and all. But again, when we talk about the technology, it's very I would say the cost implication is very high. So I think it's important that how we're going to focus on this. And we have an opportunity of different programs. I want to highlight here is that about the Jal Jeevan missions, and I think the Meghalaya is doing the great work in the Jal Jeevan mission implementations. We have Jal Shakti Abhiyan, Swachh Bharat Mission Abhiyan, Swachh Vidyalaya Puraskar, School Swachhta Action Plans, National Program for Climate Change and Human Health. I think we all have to understand and we'll have to keep it in mind and when we design any strategy or plan. All the programs are available with the funds, resources. There are a big team available in the program. So I'll take one example of one state. They have crores of rupees and the team at the state level, district level. The only thing is required that how we are utilizing the resources effectively, keeping in mind the funds available and the human resources. I want to highlight my two examples where I worked very closely with the two state government, and we had a strategic partnership with the two nodal department of Kerala government, that's Kerala State Disaster Management Authority and the local self-government. In 2018, government of Kerala faced the disaster situations, and that flash flood really created difficult situations. And the state has around 70% of the dug wells, and only the 25% of the piped water supply systems. And they are completely dependent on that. All the water sources were completely underwater, and situation was very difficult, and all the septic tanks were overflowing. So there was no system for the sludge management. All the sludge were contaminated the drinking water source. So what we did as a UNICEF and with the government Kerala, that the first exercise that we did is about the PDN exercise. This was the first kind of exercise that we supported as a UN, as around 11 UN agencies were a part of this exercise that's called post-disaster need assessment, which really helped the WAS sector to come up with a solid plan of actions of around 1,300 crores of loss and damage assessment. And that risk analysis really helped us to bring the state level planning, contributing to the Rebuild Kerala development plan, and also going down at the level, the Gram Panchayat development plan. Each GPDB, they also have the 15 FC funds for the planning, the local level planning, and then where we pitch in and where we supported and demonstrating the climate resilient water supply systems into the Gram Panchayat development plan. Coming to my Assam experience, I'm here in Assam from last 3 years, and our chief engineer, Mr. Nipendra Sharma, is also here in this conference room. With your permission, sir, I would like to share the Assam's experience. From last 3 years, you are very experienced, you're part of the state, and you much know more about the state. But in 3 years, what I understand, and I was involved with the 2022 Assam floods, and around 14 plus districts were affected. And I work very closely with the Assam State Disaster Management Authority and the Public Health Engineering Department. The first response, what I realized that we have to have a safe drinking water at the ground level and the safe sanitation practice. We have a decentralized water system that we have planned. We have distributed around the 28 emergency water treatment units. It's very much portable. We can easily transport from one place to another. We can install immediately, and that supplies water of around 700 to 1,000 liters per hour. So I think it's really important that how we come up with the local solutions, a decentralized way. We can build the capacity of the local PHAD, not only at the state level, but also work with the District Disaster Management Authority and the Public Health Engineering Department, and building their capacities and deploying, pre-positioning these all supplies. Another, using this ground level experience, we also have to have had an advocacy at the higher level to have a 3% of the total budget for all the sectors, all the departments to have a climate resilient planning and preparations. I think it is the recent development the ASDM has initiated. Now all the departments to have their 3% of funds to be allocated for the climate resilient water supply system. In Assam, around 1400 plus schemes were affected. So I think we have now planning in coming month. I think this month, 19th of February, we have meeting with the Commissioner and Secretary, Mr. Kailas Karthik, and we are thinking to have an assessment of the climate, assessment of the pipe water supply systems. Those are severely affected. So assessment, if I'm talking, is about the structural assessment, because very costly. Last year we had a 1400 plus schemes. So I think at least 1400 schemes we'll select, and we'll see that how we're going to contribute for this structural assessment and take the mitigations measures for ensuring the continuity of services even the post disaster. Thank you very much for this opportunity, everyone, and Sharant.
No, thank you so much, Parmarji. You touched upon some really important things, and this initiative of Assam, which you talked about, wherein they are allocating a certain percentage of amount for these kind of works. This is very important, because when we talk of climate change, finance becomes a very critical, finance in fact is very critical to implementation of any adaptation or mitigation efforts. And this is where, especially in adaptation, most of the stakeholders are struggling with, because mitigation has money. There are private players into that, but adaptation is something which is very local, and it becomes hard to mobilize funding for that. So this is a very novel initiative. I think it should definitely be adopted by different states. With this, and again, a ping to the audience to keep on thinking if you have any questions to ask these esteemed speakers, and park them for the end. Moving to our last speaker, Mr. Albert. He's from the Meghalaya Basin Development Authority, and he will be throwing some light on the Meghalaya Climate Change Center and what role it has played in the past several years as a technical nodal organization for climate action planning. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Bajpai. I'll prefer to speak from here, as the others have done. And yes, I can see my slide there. So the whole idea is with the climate crisis that we have, as one says that Benjamin Franklin said that if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. So where do your investments need to go? So also thanks to Dr. Aditi, who mentioned about an integrated approach. Actually, Meghalaya is a pioneer in this. We have the Meghalaya Basin Development Authority, which is kind of a convergence agency where officers from different departments of the state come in and work to solve or to even run flagship programs. One of them here, and I'm also on deputation from the central government. I'm from the Department of Biotechnology. I'll be here for a few years, and my primary association is with the Climate Change Center. Next slide, please. So you've been welcomed enough to Shillong, Meghalaya. I'd like to mention that to you that we are actually in the Meghalayan age, which started 4,200 years back. And interestingly, this also led to the declaration of one site in Cherrapunji, or as we call Sora, Maumulo Cave, which is the only geoheritage site of India in the first 100 list that came out recently. Interestingly, this age, which started 4,200 years back, started with a 200-year drought that affected civilizations across the world. The records are still there in geological history. People have done radiological studies on the stalagmite in Cherrapunji and have found these correlating with the calendar we see here. So as you can see, that was the total absence of water. Next slide, please. And just a brief about what the Climate Change Center was set up under the National Mission for Sustaining the Himalayan Ecosystem. There are several other missions. And we are also operating under the Meghalaya Climate Change Center. And some of the mandates that we have are at the bottom of the slide. Next slide, please. So as we know that according to the UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, in a report that had come out in 2015, 90% of the natural disasters are weather, water related. And how do we overcome that? How do we adapt to that? How do we sort out that? Is by looking at creating healthy freshwater ecosystems. Integrated water resource management is important. They play a strong role in adaptation, mitigation, and also circularizing your resources, particularly in the case of India now, where wastewater is a major issue. And it's only recently in one of my additional involvement with DBT Technical Expert Committee, we have only started looking at zero liquid discharge as a important mission for the country. Next slide, please. So these have also been shown by Professor Mishra. I think I need to talk to him in more detail after this session. He already had this data. We also commissioned a data from IIT Gandhinagar from Dr. Vimal Mishra. And what you can see is that we are expecting under the different scenarios. So those scenarios are the IPCC models, 2.6, 4.5. They just look at the energy per square meter. And in these models, we see that yes, we will be expecting maybe a 3 to 7% increase in rainfall over the next, in the near term, and then in the longer term, it could be up to 13%. And I won't talk about the historical data that has been discussed by Dr. Mishra. Next slide, please. And then these are some of the areas which are at high risk, where we might be facing more of the hazards related to more precipitation, such as floods and landslides. So we're looking at Southwest Khasi Hills, West Khasi Hills, and the table there just shows you the blocks within the districts. Next slide, please. And when it comes to temperature, yes, we're also going to see in the more extreme scenario in the long term, yes, it could go up by up to 3.5%. But what is more concerning actually is that studies have shown that warmer air can hold 7% more moisture for every 1% degree Celsius rise in temperature. And in hilly states, there's a recent paper that came out by Ombadi and Mohammed saying that in hilly areas, due to the topography, you could also have 15% more extreme rainfall for every 1 degree. So essentially, a warmer world will be more disastrous for hilly states. Next slide, please. And here, in the context of temperature, we see that East Jaintia Hills, which Mr. Bajpai had also mentioned, East Jaintia Hills, West Jaintia Hills, our own district, East Khasi Hills here, and even Riboy are likely to be more vulnerable to temperature-based hazards. Next slide, please. So this is our state action, climate action plan. We are planning now for 2023 to 2030, and let's forget the figures, but only thing I want to say is that what we have done is that this time, under the leadership of our Director General, Dr. Joram Beda, who spoke in the last session, is that we have done a climate action budget instead by identifying and tagging climate action relevant activities, and have found that in the budget presented last year, for the financial year 23-24, up to 3,411 crores are climate relevant actions, which comes to around 15% of the state's budget. So we are working on this and trying to use this as a foundation, and then forecasting expenditure for the next 7 to 8 years, so that we have climate actions that are already running as part of the state action climate plan on climate change, the SAPCC. But generally what happens is, if you look at all the SAPCCs across the countries, they're just like a dream or fantasy list. I want to do this, I want to do that, but none of it usually gets funded, and none of it usually gets done also. But ours, we are planning to turn it upside down from the ground, so that we have what is already running on the ground, expand on them, and we also add as and when things arise. Next, please. Just to say that we are also working with World Resources Institute India, the team with Nambi and all, and what we're looking at is we're looking at expenditure-driven climate action budget tagging. We are going to each and every department, around 9 departments are there, including forest, agriculture. We are studying the last 3-4 years of the expenditure, not the budget estimates. We're not saying that you have been allotted 100 crores to build up a reservoir. We're going there to find out that you have spent only 50 crores for building reservoirs. What happened to the other 50 crores? So trying to keep track of climate action activities. So we'll have more to say on that in a few months. Next slide, please. So we have recently also tried to get a more granular view where we are looking at the possibility of localizing climate action to the district level. Let's make the deputy commissioner or the district collector the champion of climate action. Because I think only such a bottom-up level will be efficient. And what we did was that we were able to assess only one here, the Amrit Sarovar scheme, which was announced by the PM to develop 75 water bodies in each district. So that's just an analysis of what's been achieved. And they also, now we are looking at other plantation activities and discussing with them. And we hope that in the next 2 months, we can complete all the 12 districts by visiting them and hand-holding them. Next, please. So in the short term, we want to do all that. In the long term, we want to develop district-level climate action plans, or rather you can call it the DAPCC. And maybe if we can, there are several blocks, on average 4 to 5 blocks under each district, so maybe we can also have a block development officer anchoring the climate actions in his block. Next slide, please. So of course, we also have this unique structure. This is the different bodies and different officers and ministers in the group. So the Climate Change Center also reports to the, and also gives technical support to the Meghalaya State Council for Climate Change and Sustainable Development, which is a very unique council because I don't think any of the other states have it. And we operate within MBDA, which is a society, and within us and in association is the MBMA, which is a Section 8 company, so that also allows us to get funds for implementation. So we hope that with this, we'll have a lot more to say when we meet again. And what I wanted to then just summarize up was with that, with WRI, what we are planning to do is we are planning to also, besides the expenditure tagging, we are also trying to develop climate proofing strategies for flagship programs such as the Jal Jeevan Mission, which there'll be more speakers later on to talk about source sustainability. And then our Director General of the Climate Change Center, Dr. Beda, also mentioned that we have also recently started developing the project with a project developer from the Climate Change Center. We are developing the project for carbon credits. So we are looking at REDD+ protocols, agricultural land management protocols, afforestation, reforestation, and restoration protocols. And of course, when you talk about carbon credits, it's not just that money comes to your account, but there are also several co-benefits that come. And one of them would be water efficiency, water storage, or water percolation into your aquifers. So with that, I thank the session moderator and also for bringing out the concept of this water, energy, food nexus. I think this will be one of the key drivers of all the activities related to water in the next several decades as we see. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. There's a lot of work going on in the state, and thank you for also taking forward from where I left, talking about finance. And this is an exercise, an excellent example of an exercise of climate budget tagging going on in the state. And this is how, and there are other states who have been doing it or are planning to do it. For example, recently, Kerala came up with their environment budget. Odisha has been doing it since the past 4 years. Bihar has been coming up with a green budget. And so basically the thing is that when we are talking about these climate or green budgets, the idea is to set accountability and year on year increase allocations towards these climate or green budgets. And I mean, we are happy to see that in Bihar, at least I know these allocations are increasing. For instance, in the current green budget, as compared with last year's, there's a 28% increase in allocation. So these are some of the good stories, and Meghalaya again embarking on this journey. So this will really have, we'll see the benefits in the coming years. But over to the audience in case there are any questions we have. I'll take the liberty from where Eklavya left. I'll take the liberty of a few questions, even when we have 5 minutes over past. Any questions from the audience? No? Should I pick people? Madam, can we have the mic there? The operations team, can we have the mic there? There's a question. Excuse me, you take this. Bhai sir. So your name and to whom you are asking the question.
Hello everyone. I'm Amita from WaterAid India, and this question is for all the panelists, whoever can answer this basically and address this question. So my question is, how do we factor in the community as the most important component of disaster management or climate resilience, adaptation and mitigation initiatives from the Meghalaya water policy point of view? Like how we are factoring the community in the whole policy, water policy of, or maybe the declaration.
So how to bring in inclusivity aspects in the policy is the question. To answer would. So yeah, I mean, we have been hearing when in the last session as well, a lot of community-led initiatives already going on, but any specific point?
What was mentioned was that the program, the 600 crore program that Meghalaya has with ADB on constructing water harvesting structures is going to be community-led, where the sites are going to be chosen only if the community expresses its interest and agrees to take it forward. So that, I think, is a very good example of community action within the water policy. Yeah.
I would like to add something here. Like I have worked with Uttarakhand government in one project for disaster management section is there, department is there. So they have developed a strategic platform for managing the disaster related things, and along with the technical aspects, the community participation is must. Like they have identified one person or two person from the taluk level, village level, block level or district level, and they arranged that specific training, how they can prepare for the disaster if some disaster comes. So how they can prepare for that and how they can work in that situations to help others. So this kind of initiative can be taken, like they can identify in any particular state, they can identify some community level person who is responsible for the taluk level, village level, like Gram Pradhan or something like that. So I think in this way the community participation can be added, and the response can be quick or more enhanced in this way.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm glad you raised this question, because there's one thing um, which concerns me when we talk about community participation. I mean, in this kind of a example, why I picked it out was that, okay, we're going to do the intervention only where the community shows interest, right? But in another example that was given about, getting carbon credits by asking people to to protect the forests and, giving them money to do that. Then there is whole programs which are also central government programs on SHGs doing a lot of things where the government is telling them to do. So there's a very big difference between the two. And I think as policymakers and as practitioners and as investors, we need to ensure that when we talk about community participation, it's also community initiative. And community participation, where they are the passive receivers, as are a lot of these self-help groups, of carrying out the actually being the implementers, but not influencing the planning and the budget allocation. There's going to be a difference. So I think that is something we need to keep in mind as we move forward, especially on climate finance.
Thanks. I know there are a few questions in the room, but I have been, alerted. So we'll take these offline. Maybe once the session ends, we can have these conversations. The speakers will be here. So just to wrap up, a few key takeaways from the session and from the discussion, that there is a need for data-informed analysis and assessments, which in turn feed into informing a robust planning with stakeholder involvements, so that the entire process is inclusive and includes the needs of all the stakeholders. Effective and integrated implementation, wherein we try to break these silos, and a robust MEL framework with targets and indicators which can provide that necessary feedback to the first step. And all these are supported by appropriate means of implementation, like awareness, capacity building, technology transfer, and finance. So with this, I would like to thank all my...
A point that I just like to put on the table, if you don't mind. This budget tracking is fantastic, what Mr. Albert spoke about. Meghalaya has given its first gender budget this year, 22-23, I think, right? It's extremely important to have a gender budget component in that, because at the end of the day, like I said, the liners are always women. So can we have them come in and into planning and decision making and allocation and then benchmarking, and have that as part of the state gender budget when it comes?
Okay. So thanks to all the speakers for these very rich conversations and discussions. Thanks to the audience. You can have the bilateral conversations with the speakers offline. So with this, we end this session. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.